Should you release software that is buggy? In other words, if your software isn't quite production ready, do you go ahead and still release it and give it to your customers? That is a question that my friend Dr. Valerie asked me a few weeks ago, and I've been thinking really hard about should software that isn't quite prime time ready be released? Because we see this in production all the time, especially in this new world where everything is touched by software. How many of you have a product, some sort of a consumer electronic, that doesn't quite work correctly, right? And it's becoming this trend where you ship things that are just good enough and you hope that it's good enough, because when something goes catastrophically wrong, then the real problems start. And a great example of this is Boeing. A couple of us may remember back in like 2019, 2020, Boeing had a couple of planes fall out of the sky because of a software problem. Now you got to think that Boeing must have done an analysis. Boeing, whenever that software was shipped, they must have done a review, because you just don't release software without doing quality checks, without doing some sort of a user acceptance testing, and sometimes even without having like a checklist of requirement verifications to say, yeah, this software is good. So how do we end up with planes falling out of the sky? How do we end up with so many companies, Fisker, Sonos, right? All these companies that are just pushing software that is buggy. Heck, even Apple, Android. That's why we always getting these hot fixes, right? Because they push software out that isn't quite ready. But why does this happen? Why do companies ship software that's not quite ready? Well, ultimately you have to make a call, right? You have to make a call of, do you release a feature because first to market wins, or because you're very late to the game and you just got to get something out there? Maybe you have a competitor and you really just got to get stuff out there, right? So there's these external pressures that put a tremendous amount of pressure on your stakeholders, like your executives, your directors, your CTOs, and whatnot, right? And sometimes the business aspect of things get the better of them, right? And so they make a call, whether it's the right call or the wrong call. They end up making a call, and they sometimes, most of the time, push this software that's not quite ready into production. And there's two sides that I wanted to kind of discuss in this video, because yeah, you can get away and hopefully get lucky. Hopefully that edge case that happens only once every millionth of a time doesn't occur. Or you get unlucky and you have a public, just detrimental, chaotic press day like the one Boeing had back in 2020. And so as an executive or as a leader of a company, you got to think about like, how do we do better? How do we get more situational awareness on our bugs? Because I'm a huge believer, as I'm wearing my Jura bug shirt, I'm a huge believer that bugs are a company's kryptonite, right? You're only as good as the problems that you ship. And so the question really becomes, should you even ship software that has problems? And I kind of wanted to show you in Jira how myself as a technical program manager, how I weigh my bugs, because not every bug is created equal. Every bug has its nuance, right? There's little details. And when your team doesn't fully understand all the plumbing, when they don't fully understand the architecture, when you have new folks, when you fire somebody that did know how everything was built because they were just too expensive, they were too top heavy, and it was hurting your bottom line, like you make these interesting decisions to fire knowledge at the expense of bringing in someone new that doesn't have all that situational awareness, that when it comes time to, is this bug critical? I don't know, right? Because that knowledge is gone or not available, whatever the reason may be. And so you have to make a call. And sometimes it costs you even more than just hanging on to that knowledge to begin with. So let's look at Jira and see what Jira has available for us as the executives of a company, as the project managers of a project. And let's try to understand, how do we elevate, how do we escalate situational awareness so that the decision makers have the appropriate metadata, the appropriate situational awareness, so that when it comes time to, hey, we have some open bugs here, right? Or we have some bugs that are not quite ready for prime time, but how do we put data in these tickets so that an executive or anybody can make the right call? So let's go take a look at Jira, and let me show you 3 things that I'm putting in every single one of my tickets to help bring that situational awareness to light, because you got to consider that sometimes as the project manager or the technical program manager, I don't have that technical skill. I don't have all that insight. And I'm hoping that the people that are writing the software, my engineers, I'm hoping that they do have that information, right? Because it's super critical information. But we're not always lucky. As I said, sometimes we hire new people, sometimes the team is new, sometimes we fire people that we shouldn't fire that do have the information, and we just want to make the best out of a really bad situation. So let me show you what I did in Jira. So first of all, if you're not capturing bugs in Jira, that's mistake number one. You want to be capturing bugs. So you make sure that the bug issue type is available inside of Jira. Number two, make sure that anybody can create a bug. It's very, very important that if you see something, you say something, right? You want to make the barrier to create the bugs very, very low. But that comes with some consequences. That means that if you enable anyone to create a bug, because if they see some anomaly, they immediately report it, but you might not get the best reports all the time. And what I mean by that is folks might not understand the functionality, they might not understand the capabilities, they might think it's a bug, but it's really a feature. But I think that it's more critical to capture. I think it's more important to create this culture of, something doesn't seem quite right. Let me submit a bug, right? And so I think that's more important than, oh no, you have to make sure that it's a bug. Because that's gonna put on this like very protective culture, and people are gonna be scared. And if they're not 100% certain that the bug is a bug, then they might not submit it, and things are gonna slip through the cracks. So I'd rather just open it up and then let a team of stakeholders, like the architects, the software leads, your CTO, your CIO, right? Let people that are very well skilled, that are getting paid a lot of money, let them make the call. Because again, it's better to review everything than to be quiet and let something just go and go and go. And then eventually a plane falls out of the sky and your company's reputation is completely tarnished. So that's my 2 cents there. All right, so now that we have bugs, there's a couple of fields that you want to have, okay? And so the first field that is very, very important when we're looking at bugs is that of an effects version. When we look at the effects version inside of Jira, we are basically trying to determine which version of the software was this problem found in. And folks, let me tell you, this is super, super important because most teams are not just working on one version. You're usually working on like the next version, and sometimes you're working on the version after that. Sometimes you're working on the current version, and then you got to support 2, 3, 4 different versions behind. When you look at even like Apple or even Android, right? You can see this, right? How many of you are still on like a very old version of iOS? How many of you are still on a very old version of Android and you just don't simply update, right? Well, these companies still have to maintain these versions. Obviously, there's some cutoffs, but it's very critical that you understand where, because we write a lot of code. We're writing code all day long. Where did we find this bug? Because that's step one. We got to know where it was so we can go and pull up that code base and start looking at it. Number 2, priority. Now, this one is an interesting one. I think that priority should be set by whoever finds the issue. They should at least make a recommendation because they're closest with the problem, right? They saw it. They saw it with their eyes. They touched it. They witnessed it, right? And so I think it's important that they have some influence as to like, hey, I think it's this priority. But that begs the question, what's a priority? So if your company doesn't have a well-established rubric of here's what a highest means, here's what critical means, here's what high means, medium, low, right? Your company across the entire organization, everybody from management down to the custodial job, everybody should understand what every priority means, and they should all have the exact same definition. Because the last thing you want to do when it comes to the priority of a bug is talking apples and oranges, or even worse, apples and carrots, right? You want to be apples to apples, oranges to oranges. You want everybody to always know what a critical means. And in my world, critical means someone's life is in danger, right? If you're creating software for Waymo and you have a bug that when it sees a red light, it doesn't stop, your occupants' lives may be at risk. So that is a really critical bug, right? And so you want to have this kind of a rubric to understand, okay, so we have highest, critical. And by the way, in Jira, all of these are configurable to whatever you want them to be. And as of 2024, you have the ability to set your priorities, define what those priorities are for you and your team, specifically for you and your project. So every Jira project can have their own predefined priorities, but I would highly urge you to make sure that your entire company uses the exact same definitions, the exact same priorities, because it's going to be super, super important. Once you have those two, there's one more field that I don't have on here, but I just want to articulate to you. That is the steps to reproduce. Because the last thing you want to do is send your development team, which they're a very expensive team of engineers. The last thing you want to do is send them on a wild goose chase, right? You don't want them to just like randomly be trying to reproduce these bugs, right? You want to document those steps to reproduce. And you want to make sure there's an area in your bug, whether it's in your description or in a dedicated field, right? You want something here where you put in the steps to reproduce. Okay. Step 1, I clicked on this. Step 2, I turned on the robot. Step 3, I was doing this and then all of a sudden it broke, right? So then I did these 5 steps and here's how I got there, right? And so it's super, super, super important that every bug have the steps to reproduce, because if somebody just says it doesn't work, it doesn't do anybody any good. So you always want to make sure that every bug has the appropriate effects version, the priority, and the steps to reproduce. Now, those are the things that I require just to get the bug in front of my executive board, right? Just to get it in front of my stakeholders, those architects, those leads. Because once we have that metadata, then comes the fun part. What do we do with the bug, right? And this is where we divide the worker bees from the folks that are very vested in the success of the company, right? Because somebody, one individual at the end of the day in every company needs to make the most difficult decision of them all. Do we fix this bug? Do we invest time, energy, calorie, money into fixing this bug? Or do we brush it and sweep it under the rug? Or do we delay it? Do we postpone it? Do we not fix it? Do we defer it? And that decision is ultimately the difference between a company that has a great reputation, that builds high quality products that customers come to know and love, or a reputation that is tarnished like that of the Boeing company and all the countless companies that have come before us that have had problems with their software catastrophically fail in production. And so we want to make sure that whoever that decision maker is, whoever our CTOs are, our executives, right? We want to make sure that we set them up for success. So this is why it's so important to give them this metadata, because when you're up there, when you're at that C-suite level, you don't always have the luxury of knowing the intricate details. Right? Now, a great CTO, in my opinion, they're going to be walking the shop floor, right? They're going to be down there with the ground troops, and they're going to go see with their eyes, do a visual verification. But not every culture is appropriate for that, right? Not every culture embraces their CTO knowing. Now, Elon Musk famously just said, how do you run the Boeing company when you've never even been on the manufacturing floor, right? Well, that kind of scratches my head a little bit too, right? If you're a top level executive, you should know every nut and every bolt of everything that you and your company are building. But again, those are my 2 cents. If I ran my company, that's how I would do it. But we can at least help, right? We can give them the situational awareness. And then the last thing that I'll tell you is that when it comes to the workflows of your bug, the out of the box workflow is not enough. I would highly recommend that you always put like a new status for your bugs. Because as I mentioned earlier, you want your team to be able to report bugs, right? You want them to be able to say, hey, there's a problem here. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's not working as I think it's supposed to work. And so you want these bugs to go into this new bucket, because you don't want a bug as soon as it's found to go immediately into the backlog of your team, because we're going to spend calories on maybe when somebody doesn't actually know the requirement, right? We want to prevent these chicken little skies falling type of situations. And we don't want our developers, very expensive resources again, we don't want them going on like wild goose chases, right? We want them, whenever it is that they're going to be focusing on a bug, because bugs are detrimental to the schedule, we want them to be working on something that we know that we need them to work on. And so by putting things into this category of new and hiding that status from the development board, we can basically achieve a scenario where bugs are reported by everybody. They all come into Jira. We all have our steps to reproduce, our priority, our effects version. But now we can make a decision, right? Now we can look at them in this new status and we can go, hey, what's the severity of this? Is this really the right priority? Let's go look at the steps to reproduce. Let's actually see a demonstration of the bug happening. If you have Loom, this is why I love Loom. This is one of my favorite features from Loom is, hey, let's look at the recording and see the steps to reproduce that. And by the way, Loom with AI can now make the ticket for you, right? And so we want to look at evidence. We want to look at concrete data. You don't want to make business decisions on hearsay. You want to look at facts and data. And so we can put all that facts and data into Jira, whether it's in a field and these workflows, right? And everything I'm kind of describing here. And then our executives can go, okay, this is a legitimate bug. Let's prioritize this, whether we need to do a hot fix. So drop what you're doing. Let's fix it right now. Or let's fix it in the next release or make sure it goes into the next sprint. Now you can make that call. And that, my friends, is where the fixed version comes into play. So once you make that determination, you can now move into developer backlog. And then we have a field called fixed version here where you determine, okay, so it's either going to go immediately. We need a brand new hot fix. We're shipping this today. Or we got something going out at the end of the sprint because we're in the middle of a sprint. Or we're going to ship something by the end of the release, right? Whatever the case may be, you can now determine that with your fixed version. And the final thing I want to leave you with is that of the components. So the components are like an overpowered field in Jira that aren't really used very well. But if you take your system, right? If you take the system of systems of whatever it is you're creating, and you do break it up into your subsystems, into your different components, and you put them into Jira, you can see visually, right? Virtually, but visually, you can see what parts of your system. So in this case, I have like my shipping details, my shopping cart, my catalog, my customer service section, right? I have different subsystems of this website that I'm building. And I can actually put the bug against that part of the system. So when I go look at my components as a whole, right, I can create dashboards and metrics and stuff like that. I can go, wait, I can't ship my shopping cart. It's got 5 priority 1 bugs, right? And now you can make that call, right? You can make those decisions and figure out, okay, how do we funnel our resources? What do we do here? Do we defer? Do we delay, right? And so answering the question of like, do we ship bugs in production becomes so much more trivial when you have all this situational awareness inside of Jira. And this is why I love Jira, right? This is why Jira is such a great tool for enterprises. And you don't even have to use Jira, just use some tool that gives you this. But Jira is my bread and butter, right? But it's so important, right? You don't want to get to the finish line and work off of like rumors, work off of hearsay. You want to have as much facts and data, and you want to have reports, you want to have checklists, you want to have proof that this build is as high quality as possible. Because yeah, you might be able to get away with it for a little bit, but eventually enough of a bug is going to be slipping through those cracks, and hopefully it doesn't happen to you, right? But look at Boeing. Here we are 4 years later, and we're still trying to figure things out. We're still trying to address our quality problems, right? And software quality, it hurts me when you see layoffs, right? Software quality teams are the first ones to go, right? They're the first ones to, like, if you're a troublemaker, right? If you're raising a lot of bugs or you're delaying progress, right? Like you're the first one to go because you're getting in the way of innovation. And maybe that's okay at the beginning, but when you're a big mature company, your reputation and innovation, it's a teeter-totter that your executives have to balance each and every day. Because you got to be fast enough to get the product out, but you also got to be cautious enough to get the right product out. Because one little bug that could be very detrimental can just completely ruin a company. Look at Fisker, right? One review from one YouTuber bankrupts an entire company because of a buggy software system that wasn't quite ready for consumers. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know, because this is a different style of video. It's a little bit more philosophical, but if you want some concrete hard evidence, let me know in the comment section. I'd love to actually walk through Jira and maybe show you how to configure all these things, how to do the workflow, right? How to have these dashboards that help you surface those critical facts and data that your executive team is going to be needing in order to make that final and ultimate call. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you smash that like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, like 95% of you haven't, smash the subscribe button as well. And I'll see you in the next one.